This is our first Messaging 2.0 meetup. It's exciting times for messaging. As you all know, some interesting stuff is going down. I'd like to thank you all for coming. My name is Alex Miller. I work as a developer evangelist for TeamChat and SmartMessaging.io. We make tools for people to do messaging in their apps, from their back end, build bots, all kinds of tools. So I think we have some great people to talk today. Today's topic is the rise of smart messaging platforms. It's a really auspicious time for this meetup. Yesterday, Facebook announced a new partnership with Uber to do some really cool stuff on Facebook messaging platform. And additionally, Slack also announced an $80 million messaging fund. So that's really good news for all of us in the space. Before we start, I've got a little bit of housekeeping to attend to. Number one, beer and pizza. In case you did not know, please enjoy, help yourself. Number two, the restrooms are over there. A bunch of people have asked me about that, so they're outside that door and to the right. This is the Vault. It's a co-working space that is kind enough to host us and let us host an event once a month. So our next event will be January 26th. That's a Tuesday. I think it's the last Tuesday of January. Assuming this one goes down without any horrible things happening, I think that should be okay. I want to thank Nikki, who is around here somewhere. She works at the Vault, and my buddy Fernando over there for helping me just kind of like set everything up. We've got a camera over here. So yes, thank you. Come in, have a seat, put your name on the thing. That's the other thing. Before you go, if you haven't put your name on the little sign-up sheet over there, please do me a favor and put your name down there. And yes, so we have a camera set up, and that means there's going to be video, hopefully, if I don't screw it up. And then I'll send you guys out some video tomorrow, or whenever it gets edited. And then we've got a fantastic panel today. I'll be the moderator. I've been a founder in the messaging space. I founded a couple of companies, ChatCenter.io, co-founded, and Grata.co, which is both tools to help people do messaging and enterprise and for developers. And I also founded a bot called TextTurner, which is a Slack bot which allows you to do human translation. And then we have Varud Sheath over here. Varud is the founder of TeamChat and also the founder of SmartMessaging.io, and also notably the founder of Elance, which is one of those once-in-a-decade companies. And then we've also got Justin Vandehay over here. Justin's the founder of Growbot, which is just killing it on the Slack platform today. He's trying to figure out how to keep the servers up. And we've got Vic Sagar over here. I hope I said that right. And he's the CEO and founder of Myra Labs, and they are building awesome tools for. Well, I'll let everybody explain what they do in a second. So I think that's it. Why don't I get Varud, Vixit, and Justin to come join me over here, and I'll start asking. I have some questions here, and then at the end we'll take some questions from you guys. And then hopefully, if you haven't gotten bored of each other, you can stick around for a little while and talk to each other a little more. Oh, and yeah, help yourself to a beer. I think I mentioned that already. I'm going to start. Welcome. So, 30-second elevator pitch. Justin, why don't you start?
The Growbot. So, alright, so Growbot, on the surface, it's a Slack bot. It looks like a Slack bot, but what we're building is a performance management solution for the next generation workforce. So it makes it easy for, initially, peers to give appreciation to one another, but over time we start to gain intelligence about how employees interact with one another to start to do some really interesting things around quantifying performance and making the workforce more engaged.
Varud?
I think Alex touched upon it a little bit, but Team Chat and smartmessaging.io is a smart messaging platform. We'll talk about why smart in a little bit. But these are sort of advanced and comprehensive developer tools for messaging to build messaging bots on any channel. Could be Slack, could be email, SMS, WeChat, WhatsApp, and so on. Or to enable messaging inside the app, right? In-app messaging along with bots that work with those. So that's what we do.
That's it.
I founded Myra Labs, which is a platform that provides conversational AI as a service. So anybody who wants to build a system that you can talk to, be it a messaging-based bot, be it Internet of Things, virtual reality, whatever it might be, we offer a service that allows you to come and train your own intelligent assistant that can either respond back something like a Siri might or take actions on your behalf. And it supports natural language. So you basically just talk to it in completely natural language.
So today's topic is the rise of messaging as a platform. It's also, what is a messaging platform? And we want to start by defining messaging 2.0, messaging platforms. Just kind of what is the space? What's going on? Maybe Baru, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think messaging 1.0, if you will, or mobile messaging. Actually, let's back up a little bit, right? I think messaging's been around for decades. It's not new, right? I mean, email itself was the first messaging service and so on. But as we got to mobile and smartphone and small devices, in this form factor, messaging is becoming even more dominant, right? It's sort of gotten a renewed sense of life where it's so much more impactful and dominant than it used to be, right? So in messaging 1.0, if you will, the WhatsApp, the WeChat, the Line, Kakao, they've sort of exploded mainly for P2P communication, small group messaging, if you will. And that was the first wave, but in my mind, what's happening is they're becoming more and more as messaging platforms. You can do more things with it. Not just chat with your friend, but chat with other businesses, with vendors. You can do, WeChat is the best example where you can do e-commerce, you can book a taxi, order pizza, you can do banking, trading, just inside what you think is a messaging app. And suddenly it looks like, much more. It's a platform on which you have a lot of these services, right? Consumer services like e-commerce sites and transaction services, enterprise services, right? Could be HR, could be CRM, ERP, sort of things. So more and more services getting built on messaging itself, which is, what most people, conventionally think of as messaging, which is chatting with a friend, this is taking it to a whole new level. Now this is business workflows, enterprise processes, everything that's a website or an app would now sort of be available through a messaging app. And I think to me, that's 2.0, that's a new platform. It's sort of completely redefining what messaging is.
Justin, fix it?
Yeah, just to add on to what Baru mentioned, I mean, I think in traditional development, if you think about the traditional app experience, you've got the interface, which is the primary point of contact between the end user and the job that they're trying to execute on. And I think that the conversational UI, the wave of that is starting to become really at the forefront of just application development and how bots enable software to do a job to make it life easier for the employee. And I think what it's enabling is removing the need for that friction between the application and the job getting done. And I think text is sort of that control and the mechanism to do the job. I think is pretty exciting. And that's sort of what we recognize as Growbot sort of taken off is text is our language, text is our language, and that is our interface. And I think the role of the copywriter and the journalist is going to become even more critical as software sort of evolves with this movement. So that's
yeah, I think one sort of counterpoint to that is that messaging platforms or messaging apps are becoming platforms, and it's important for app developers who provide services today to figure out that they need to target these platforms as well. And just like they would build an iOS or Android app, they need to build stuff for this. And the question is, how are you going to go about building it? Because if text is the medium, you need to be figuring out ways to really interpret text without messing it up, even a little bit. And I think there's a bunch of challenges I think that are involved there around how do we actually get this post-app state into a messaging platform era where every application is available as a messaging bot. But that would be my comment there.
Yeah, so you're saying we're moving from a a post-platform era into kind of a cross-platform era. What are some of the big consumer insights that are driving this? Why is this happening now? Messaging has been around for decades. What's becoming so much more important, today than maybe 3 years ago or 5 years ago?
I think people, messaging obviously has been around, but I think what's recent, I think a couple of developments. One, almost everybody now has API-driven services, which they try to expose using channels. And I think that, like example, this is an actual quote by the CEO of KLM. He's like, I'd be happy if 4 to 5% of my customers use my app. Right? That's the kind of penetration they've had. And actually, 95% of their customers are now on messaging platforms. And because of the advances in sort of natural language and things like that, people are waking up to the fact that you can actually address all of these people on a platform they already use every day, using a mechanism they already use, which is text, to interact with services they already know about. So there's really not much that's very different. It's sort of combining things that are available together through sort of some technology leverage that is now available.
I think in my view, it's been the shift from the large screen to the small screen, right? I think if you look at all our behaviors on the large screen, I mean, you have dozens of tabs open in the browser, it's easy to switch context, you have email, you have instant messaging, and then you have all these other websites that you're working with, right? When you get to the small screen, context switching is hard, right? To switch from one app to another to another. Downloading apps again and having this large directory of apps is much harder on a small screen than but on the desktop or in the browser, it's not as big a problem. So, the moment you get to a small screen, I mean, you have limited real estate, you have limited sort of mental model and context, and if that context switching is hard, you kind of condense to a few use cases. And if you look at the usage patterns, on the large screens, it used to be, your favorite websites and apps and productivity apps and so on. On the small screen, the top apps by far, number one is messaging, right? Across the world, any pattern and so on. Maybe gaming a little bit, and then it just sort of decays very, very substantially. So that's the big change. I mean, in that small screen, people are comfortable. It's, there's very little space, so all you can do is type in a short message, and that's becoming the most preferred way to use the small screen. And I think that's why, as you spend more and more time in there, it's then becomes incumbent on the entire sort of computer industry, if you will, to build services so that users can stay inside messaging, so they never have to leave. And that's why that's sort of a renewed interest in saying, okay, if people on the small screen, if everyone likes messaging, then let them just stay there, and we'll just put everything in there rather than forcing users to go, to hundreds of apps or hundreds of websites.
Yeah, I think it is, just to Birut's point, it's just like overload. I think you're seeing it's just mind share. And in our case, it's like, we're solving, our bot solves a very specific need in a very specific vertical, and the realization was that as we looked at the HR category specifically, it was like everybody was trying to hack it with a third-party app to get employees to share feedback about one another, and the employee is just so busy, right? I mean, as employees, as founders, it's like they just don't have the mind share to change their workflow. And for us, it was like that aha moment probably 6 months ago where it was like, okay, if we can build into the communication channel where this stuff's already happening, we can provide value and limit the friction. And I think, so part of it is mind share, and I think what's exciting about it, I think what these guys are doing is they're creating really the infrastructure layer to enable more innovation, whereas like we're very vertical specific, and we think that I think you're going to see category shifts where there's innovation that's happening and again, there's the consumer side and then there's the enterprise side. We're more focused on the enterprise, but I think it just has to do with mind share and overload, and in the workplace, people just don't have the appetite or the time for it.
Yeah, so there's so many different platforms. You guys chose to build on Slack. Are you going to be building on like SMS, Facebook, Twitter, WeChat? How should other people approach building their tools too? What do you think about that? Like, which channels should they be? Should they be single channel? Should they be omni-channel?
Yeah, I think so. The story that I feel like the investor wants to hear is, because every time you build into a platform, it's like there's there's always concern around platform risk, right? Like if you built early on in the Facebook ecosystem and everybody kind of knows what happened with Twitter, there's concern and risk there. I think what's different about this wave, other than just like having learned a lot from the challenges that those developer ecosystems face, was that I think for us it's really around nailing a few key interactions. I don't think it's all too different from app development. I mean, my recommendation would be, at least to start, go really narrow and focus on one thing that you know works well, and then just iterate. And I think in our case, it's like a lot of it is just language and everything from the onboarding experience, how you introduce a bot. We've learned a lot. We've churned a lot of big customers through spamming, some of our early big enterprises to figure out, like, okay, what's the quickest way to get, ripped out of BuzzFeed Slack account. So I think there's just a lot of iteration that went there. But when we started to go really narrow, it allowed us to build something that we think is valuable and grows. But I think over time, we're like Beirut and these guys are building, the cross-platform support will be critical. Slack is a great partner. I think they've done an amazing job. I think there's a huge ceiling for growth there. So strategically, it just makes sense, and we love what Stuart's doing. We think that there's just so much early work that this is just like, it's the early days of a big movement here. So we just, again, started very narrowly with Slack, built a product that we feel people hopefully love and will continue to use, and kind of taking it day by day, and just trying to catch our breath at this point, because the marketplace sort of changes the game a little bit. So,
Brew, what do you think? Do you think this is for new developers? Do you think they should be going from one platform? Or?
So this is a classic problem anytime a new sort of trend emerges, right? I mean, firstly, I think this is as big a paradigm shift as sort of the move from desktop apps to browser and websites, right? Where we're going from mobile apps to messaging and bots, right? So, and every time that happens, when it was websites, okay, which browser do you build to? When it was mobile devices, which OS do you build to, and so on. And now here it's which channel do you build to? I think it's somewhat different. I mean, it's probably, the enterprise space is probably going to stay fragmented. I mean, Slack has a ton of adoption and buzz, but one organization can always adopt a different messaging channel than others, because the network effects only have to happen within the org. It doesn't have to happen outside. So if they have a lot of field employees, they may not use Slack as much. They may be on email, they may be on Skype, they may be on other things, Microsoft tools, IBM tools, and so on. So ultimately, the enterprise space will be fragmented somewhat. Consumer space, on the other hand, I mean, there's a few platforms that are dominant: Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and so on. So fewer choices there. But ultimately, as a developer of a bot, you want to be platform agnostic. You don't want to bet on a channel. You probably should start with one, no doubt. But because you have limited resources and such, but at least do it in a general enough way that it can be scalable, or sort of, write once, run anywhere type thing. So
yeah, really I would say nail that, go narrow with because everybody's, I think, trying to just replicate workflows that haven't worked in the consumer experience. So really, I think refining what works and listening to, it's like anything, listening to your users and building something that they want to use. But I think strategically, like you said, you have to architect it in a way where you can be nimble, because I think obviously if you pigeonhole yourself in any core interaction, you're kind of up shit creek without a paddle. That's part of my.
Yeah, build for the platform that has the most uptake. At this point, Slack seems to be winning. Sorry?
It has the most.
Oh, the uptake of developers and sort of momentum behind it, right? If you build for that, you're going to be able to test out your ideas quickly, iterate.
But not if you're doing an e-commerce thing. That would work in the enterprise.
Sure, I think it depends on a lot of things, right? If it's a consumer-based system, then you probably want to target where the consumer momentum is most.
Right.
And so, a lot of people who are doing e-commerce actually just use text. They don't even go to Facebook Messenger for both development reasons and sort of audience reasons. But I think for the enterprise, Slack definitely is doing a lot. And I think with the block of WhatsApp in Brazil, I think Telegram is now taking up this, Slack, so to speak, and they're creating millions of users on a daily basis just because WhatsApp got blocked. So whoever is now targeting WhatsApp has a great opportunity of, because Telegram all of a sudden is huge buzz right now.
Oh yeah, this was something I missed in my little introduction. I think it was yesterday that Brazil blocked Telegram, so Telegram picked
WhatsApp.
up. Sorry, WhatsApp. So Telegram picked up 1.5 million users in Brazil today.
There was, I don't exactly know the reason for this, but I think they basically had some sort of, so again, this is all something that nobody really knows the internal thing, but from what I've read at least, it's just simply few portions of their audience got either spammed or something like that, and this was done by people who maybe think of were anti-government or something like that, so they just shut it down.
So moving on, are bots the new app? I mean, there's been a lot of things like talking about how people are interacting with web services and with internet services inside chat. Are these a new way to build apps? Should people even start thinking about, am I going to be building a mobile app for my company, or am I just going to go straight to building a bot to live on these other platforms? What kind of opportunities are there for building startups around bots, for emerging brands, for enterprises, and what kind of messaging services are we going to see? Are we going to see millions of bots like we saw millions of apps come out in the last 10 years? The next thing?
I think a lot of this, anybody who's building a bot should definitely watch out for the app problem, the fact that we have thousands of apps and there's huge amounts of issues around that. I have a couple of thoughts there. One thing is that as bots grow in sort of scope and number, there will need to be layers, very much like Google doing for websites. You need systems that go out and look for the right bot for you, depending on intent. Now, a lot of these things are most likely going to be owned by the platform because we have sort of entrances into all of these other services that people are building. So Slack is very well poised to have a super bot, if you will, or as Telegram calls it, the bot father, where you can basically go to that one bot and basically ask about anything that you need. So I think that will become a discovery mechanism that is very contextual, and all of these services will basically be bots. But my second point is that they may not have the same amount of brand loyalty that we have today. Like today we think of cabs, we think of Uber or Lyft. If there's thousands of services and there's like a layer in the middle, I just say cab. And then that guy comes in and bids to solve your cab request, just like some people serve ads today. And I think the platforms are very well poised here. So I'm hoping we won't see download one app for one thing. I'm hoping we see a lot of services plugged in, sort of targeting these super bots or bot discovery mechanisms. But for the second part of Alex's question, I think people should be definitely looking at building for the next 5 years as well, or the next 2 years even. Because I think that, most people, because they're already on messaging platforms, it just makes sense for you to serve them because they're looking for your service. You have that brand association already going on. I mean, if you're a brand that does, if you're OpenTable or Yelp, people think of you the minute they think of restaurant reservations. And then they want to find you on the platform they're on as quickly as possible. So for you as that brand, you definitely need to be there rather than have this high friction thing of downloading my app, registering, and then using it. At the same time, if you're starting ground up and you don't have a presence yet, you can actually be really benefited from the fact that you're, being able to reach out to audiences now can be really easy, can be really made better. So I think there's a lot of opportunities around bots, especially around discovery mechanisms of bots, around sort of providing services through your channel.
I was going to say, I think, I think it's going to be, I think they're going to be complementary. Honestly, I think, our vision for sort of where we're headed is we know that we want to disrupt a lot of the traditional crappy HR software that lives out there, and those are standalone applications. And for us, I mean, the IP and the bot interaction is, we believe, defensible because it's changing the paradigm around how you interact with, call it an Android, but basically a bot. But we believe that it becomes a channel, right? Like any other data point. Like if you build an app, it collects data to enrich, insights that you can help provide to the end user. That's sort of like how we think about it. So I think it'll be complementary to, apps as a data collection point, bots as a channel, a data collection point where we can start to like surface value. we've also seen some really interesting things where, and I think this is kind of to your point, where we've actually seen like bot-to-bot interactions. So we have one of our customers leverages a Jira bot to talk to Growbot to kick out a survey. And so there's like just a lot of interesting things I think that can happen internally within the dynamic of not only the front-facing end user experience, but how bots will enable other third-party apps to work together. And I think that's another really interesting thing that I think is happening as the space sort of evolves.
Yeah, I think I'll answer it in two parts, right? The first part is, like I said, it's a big shift where everything's going to get reinvented as a bot, because as more and more users stay in messaging, as more and more services come about, you know, every desktop app that became a website, that became an app, is now going to become a bot. Okay, so it opens up a ton of opportunities, right? Like could be ERP, CRM, HR on the enterprise side, could be e-commerce and taxi cab booking and so on. All of these interfaces are going to evolve. So if you're starting out from scratch today, I think it makes, just looking forward a little bit, it makes sense to do a bot rather than an app, right? But there's something different, right? You had a series of websites or a series of apps. Well, they had limited ability to interact with each other. And just building upon what Justin said, bots are something special, right? For the first time, you're going to have a lot of services on a common sort of messaging platform or a messaging bus, if you will, right? So you have humans, you have web services, maybe you have IoT devices and sensors, your smart home, your smart car, and so on, wearables, all sort of pushing messages onto that same common platform. And once you do that, I mean, think about the interactivity and the interconnectivity, right? You could chain bots, like you were talking about. You could have a hierarchy of bots, with a bot managing other bots, managing some other bots, if you will. You could have amazing workflows, which the sensors detect something, the big data analytics engine sort of spits out a recommendation which goes to a human for approval, which then goes back to the actuators to effect something out there, right? And suddenly you have these these virtual organizations where everything connects, and these are nimble organizations, extremely coordinated, just doing some very, very interesting things. So so not just that everything's going to become a bot, but the interactions among them creates a whole lot of possibilities that it's really even hard to imagine or conceive of, but possibilities are endless.
It's fascinating. It's like, in the last 5 years, REST APIs have become standard, where people, talk to services like their HTTP, like their websites. And in the next 5 years, maybe that whole thing will go away, and everybody's going to be talking to each other on the chat bus.
In fact, if I can just make one quick point, right? I think almost every sort of paradigm before, right? Whether it's a website or an app and so on, they force humans to behave like computers, right? I mean, go to tab 1, menu item 4, and click on something for something to happen. But for the first time, this messaging platform and bots, right? You're forcing computers to behave like humans, which is, hey, chat to me in text. Yeah. Don't ask me to click tabs and buttons and so on. You just talk to me, right? And it just makes it so much more natural and intuitive. And I think it just makes it interesting.
But I think what else is really interesting that's happening right now is, like yesterday, Uber launched this tool, so you could request an Uber inside Facebook, and they send a message that looks like a map with where you're going inside the Facebook messaging app. And so now, instead of just the messages being plain text, we're seeing the messages being structured. So WeChat, for example, in China has voice messages that you can send back and forth. They have map messages that you can send. So if bots are like the new apps, messages are going to become, do you guys see messages becoming new homes for UI experiences that can grow and change and be very versatile as well? Or are people going to stick to text?
I think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see an evolution of the messaging standard. Just like we saw HTML 1.0 go to 5.0, we're going to see messaging go from images and text to sort of rich widgets and dynamic maps and whatnot. And I think The question is going to be who's going to make the standard, because there is 10 different messaging platforms, and we've already had so much trouble with adopting HTML standards, and that's a free open standard. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what the final adoption actually happens, but I'm sure it's going to happen, because like we see with the Uber example, but also I think like Telegram, for instance, has actually pioneered this in some way, because they allow you to not only change the message itself in that they have structured stuff, they allow you to change the keyboard based on the kind of message you get. So if you get a poll message, your keyboard transforms into a yes or no. And so that's a really an interesting way of looking at how you can transform not just the messages, but also the UI experience of the app that you're using very dynamically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in a way, the message becomes the new UI, right? And you're going to have fractions of web pages or fractions of apps sort of embedded inside the message. So the conversation flow is the primary flow, the news feed, if you will. And inside the feed, you have little interactive widgets or website components, if you will. And by the way, that's what we call, sort of smart messages, meaning the messages have structured data or have some code and logic embedded in there, which enables messages to be smart about things, right? A simple example is, most messaging apps get cluttered in large groups. But imagine the poll that you're talking about. If 1,000 people reply to the poll, it should know that these are all related messages, and it should aggregate it automatically. It just shows the one message which gives you the overall score, right? Or if it's a survey or people filling in forms, it just knows. Or let's say if it's an alert, server alerts or IoT alerts. I mean, maybe they're color coded for severity. Maybe there's an escalation path built in, so it knows first go here. If they don't respond in 3 minutes, then go to the next person and the next person. You can embed a lot of logic in the messages itself, and once you do that, I mean, it just, again, opens up a lot of possibilities. So I think we'll have to, I mean, it's not either extreme. I mean, there are things where chat is the most natural thing, and then there are elements, dynamic maps, or an invoice, or a shopping cart, or a checkout, or a confirmation. I mean, these are structured entities, right? There's a reason why when you go to McDonald's, they show you a menu. They don't want to talk to you. They just like combo 4 and option number 3, because it's just easier to select from a menu item. So it's the same thing. I think we'll find as messaging platforms evolve, certain things are inherently conversational, certain things are inherently structured, and they will evolve in that way. It's almost like the messaging app becomes a mini browser with sort of interactive elements embedded in there.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, I think there's the interaction layer around, like you mentioned, smart messaging and a more dynamic experience. But I think what we think is particularly interesting is the context of the other third-party data that gets pumped into these platforms. So if you look at like Slack, for example, and this is kind of getting back to the point of like how other apps will complement, we use the Jira example, but it provides more context around bot intelligence. So, an example in Slack's case is like they have really super tight integration with GitHub, right? So when something gets pushed, or like you sync calendar, there's all these other third-party data points that provide more richness beyond just like the interactions with the front-facing UI, which I think will, like you mentioned, will become more intelligent. But I think there's also aspects that I'm particularly excited about to help create a more, even a more enriching experience. And that's relative to other third-party software that, feeds into that. Maybe it's a master bot, maybe it's a field of bots. That's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting.
I love the word master bot. One of the things I noticed when I started using Slack and HipChat in an organization is that all of a sudden I have so much more data coming into me as a member of a team. I'm seeing when somebody's pushing code into the repo. I'm able to kind of coordinate my team based on what's going on in chat. And I think that's going to change the way a lot of stuff is happening. Before I got into chat, or actually after I stopped using IRC in like 2000, later I was in marketing for a while. I built some ad tech at one of the biggest social networks in China. And all of my colleagues in the ad tech and marketing space, I see them now talking about chat as a tool for sales and customer service. And well, I think that's really natural. I almost think that it's not even that worth talking about, because obviously it's a great, it's the tool for sales and customer service. What else is going to be happening? How are people going to, how should people, as they build new businesses, look at messaging as ways to coordinate teams, as ways to make things happen across organizations? What else can be done with chat? What are we going to see? I'm going to throw that to the first person who wants to hit the button.
You want to go?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say, I'm going to take the consumer side of that.
Okay.
I think that brands have historically had a one-way communication with people, right? They sort of outreach. They've never really invited feedback. Every email you get from your airline says, please not reply to this email, we don't monitor it, right? And that happens for everyone. With the advent of messaging, and especially smart messaging or intelligent messaging, I think that paradigm needs to change, where if you want higher engagement with your customers, you have a two-way channel available. And so I think what brands should do at this point, especially if you're consumer brands, is that when you have a user on a messaging platform interacting with you, that is the one and only way to interact with you. And so you can do everything then. You can do everything from booking your tickets to changing your seats to ordering in-flight meals and whatnot in that one sequence, and all this is historically stored. And you can actually achieve the ultimate personalization. So far, personalization engines are like demographics, and they try to get that down as far as possible. But now you're personalizing to that one person, and you know who that person is without doing cross-device cookie joins and whatnot. And so if you can do that, if you can achieve this, that you have the ability to broadcast and receive feedback from your customers, I think that's really interesting. So I mean, any consumer brand or any consumer-facing brand that has an app today is fair game to use messaging as a way to have this channel of communication one-on-one.
Absolutely. I think my question was, because that seems like such a no-brainer, right? Like if you're not doing that, if you're not thinking about that, I mean, you're behind.
I think to that point, and I'll take the enterprise lens to it now, having built a bot in the enterprise, one of our key features that we actually think is pretty powerful and seems so obvious was the ability to support, we call it operator, but direct support with a human. And so I think that the connection that we've been able to build, especially with our early customers, they're struggling in command line. And again, this gets back to sort of some of the limitations around that aren't maybe as intelligent, but being able to have a closer connection with a human through that interaction and the bot enabling that, I think is something that is critical. I think even more so probably on the consumer side to have a more direct relationship with the brand, but I think internally we've been able to get not only just really rich feedback from customers to help make the product better, but it's also just help really support customers when they needed it. And I think that that's something that I think a lot of people overlook, is that there's a lot of AI and a lot of intelligence that's going around these direct human interactions. But what GrowBot is actually encouraging people to do is connect offline. I mean, one of our core commands for feedback, from professional feedback, is what we call it tips, but it's essentially anonymous peer-to-peer feedback. And we've seen some pretty raunchy tips at times. It's pretty sensitive in the workplace, but we actually have a set of moderation built in where GrowBot routes it to a manager before it gets sent to the end user. And so that has helped encourage really valuable offline conversations as well. So if a manager wants to take that before getting in a room with somebody, laying them out, they've got more data about it. And I just think there's an interesting angle from a support standpoint and value that can help empower more meaningful offline interactions as well.
I think, to your question of what else are we going to see, I mean, I would actually flip it around saying, literally any sort of business process or workflow, whether it's inside the enterprise or even on the consumer side, can very likely be mapped onto a messaging type workflow. Because, I mean, in a way, if you get deeper, I mean, even HTTP is a request response. I mean, it's sort of a messaging paradigm, if you will, right? You ask something, you receive something, and then you sort of interact with it. At least a lot of the examples we've seen, let's say even on the enterprise, there's a lot of these workflows that are either too heavy and monolithic, right? Like say when you think of HR, you think of these large PeopleSoft, Workday, Oracle-like systems, and kind of what Justin's doing is saying, you know what, just a tiny part of it, that the 80-20 is in just doing this little thing really elegantly and simply, right? So that's one part of it, make it simple, lighter, if you will. The millennials these days, right? It's sort of, they want it to be lighter, simpler, the tweaked equivalent of everything, the short version of just about every workflow or every process, right? Not only that, there's lots of little processes that never get implemented because they always get over-engineered and, you know, nobody builds, it kind of slips through the cracks if it's not big enough to be a market. But what if you could just automate something or write a bot for it in like 15 minutes? I mean, it could be a approval workflow or, you know, sort of organizing a meetup like this. I mean, you can do these things very, very quickly and easily. So I think, you know, to democratize, you know, bot development, I think is going to be a lot easier than app development was or web development was in many ways. You know, going back and forth. So you're going to just see, I mean, just about anything, right? Any consumer service, anything you see as a website or anything you see as a enterprise system is going to be a simple bot. And it doesn't have to be simple; it will be complex on the back end, but it's just the front end is very easy and simple and natural. It's probably a better word. So I think, you know, it's going to be very broad.
Yeah, but also, I was going to say, don't downplay the language and the interaction as well. Like, I think that's something that Slack has done particularly well, and you see it from your usage with it. It's very, they just have, I feel like they've nailed the bot interaction, like the language they use. It's very thoughtful, and I think that will be really critical as well. I think that's why I made the comment about the copywriter earlier. I think that's just going to be such a critical part of our business because, I mean, you know, that's something we keep testing and iterating on is the language that we use. So,
as a product designer, I've always thought that copy is one of those like lost arts that people build. They like. I see product designs all the time where it's wireframe and there's no copy. It's like they're Lorem Ipsum in there. And for a bot, it seems to me that copy is one of the most important things that you can work on, just because that is your user experience, right? So I want to go talk about some products. I want to ask you guys, what are the best products that you've seen in the space? What are the coolest thoughts? What are the coolest experience? What brands are doing it right? And what brands have the opportunity to do it better in the future?
I think not. I mean, we are in the early stages, so, you know, I guess not to Grobot maybe.
yeah, Grobot.
There you go. No, I think we are in the early stages. I mean, I'll just share a few examples that we've seen, right? So there's a bank that's using sort of, you know, the team chat platform for communicating with its sales teams. So they capture sales data, and the bot automatically generates a leaderboard, which is sent out to the whole team. So now you have live sort of, and in the sales teams, this sort of competitive dynamic works, right? You may not do that in development teams or other teams, if you will, but that was the purpose, and it's sort of meant to reward and recognition for the top performers on a real-time basis, and even at the end of the day, they would send a little reward or a gift voucher based on the performance during the day. And that's one example. We've seen, you know, retail chains sort of aggregating sort of, you know, daily sales activities or and automatically creating a report and sending it out to people. We've seen, you know, sort of service call management workflows, you know, reporting and charts where there's lots of data coming in, but somebody wants to see a real-time snapshot. It's really hard to, you know, you have to log into a dashboard and go somewhere. I think for big data analytics, again, it's a big point, right? It's one thing to have the insights, but if that insight doesn't reach the right person at the right time, right? Meaning maybe shift this item from this shelf to another shelf, or, you know, change this web page from, you know, put this as the featured item, if you will. So we've had people trying to use that for, you know, to sort of send the insights on an outbound basis as opposed to wait for people to come in and look for stuff. So I think these are some of the few use cases that we are seeing.
I've seen a couple of sort of very interesting thoughts. I'm sure there's many more, but the one I can remember right now is called Berkeley, actually.
I was gonna drop Berkeley too.
And I think Berkeley is really nice in its simplicity because all you do is you go to the spot and you basically say, I want to file a new expense report, and you basically upload a photo, or rather send it a photo of your receipt. They have some great image processing in the back, and it says, is that a $59.99 receipt? You're like, yes. And is it from XYZ Acme Corp? You're like, yes. Like, great, your expense has been filed, right? And then on, let's say the end of the quarter, it would send you a reminder saying, hey, have you filed your expense report yet? If not, you can do it right there, because hopefully you have the receipts or whatever. And I think the fact that it's really simple, has a very simple interface, but they're doing some interesting, complicated stuff in the background, is a far cry from, let's say, the Concur, whatever you guys may have used to file expenses, which can be a huge pain, especially when for every receipt they have this complicated workflow of like many buttons, many sort of apps, and many kinds of things you have to do to file one receipt. So I think that was like a really, really great sort of bot-oriented workflow that I've seen that I really liked.
Yeah, took mine. I mean, I think there's also just some really interesting synergies. Like, I haven't actually played around with the Envoy sync, but I think it's an interesting example of like how interesting apps like sync with messaging. And Envoy's built an amazing business. You probably interact with it anytime you go into another meeting to check in, but I think they've built some really interesting ways to sync that into their broader strategy. And I think it's a good example of how standalone apps are going to interface with bots and being able to like use messaging to make the enterprise more efficient. I do like the guys at Birdly. I think Quan and those guys are like, they're really good guys. They're doing some cool stuff, and it'll be interesting to see. I think there's kind of two categories. There's like those that are a little bit more broad, and then there's the very job specific ones. I think you look at like expense management, Concur. I think Robot's a little bit more broad because we start with appreciation, so it's sort of like it touches a few different facets of the business. But I don't think there's a wrong way to go either way. You're either kind of doing something a little bit more broad, or you're doing something very narrow that solves a painful thing like filing your expenses, which definitely sucks. So.
Yeah, so I'd love it if you guys had some questions. Got your hand up first. So.
Yeah. What is the future of email? Where is email headed given the landscape, the trends that you guys just described?
I think in answering this question, I think it reminds me, if you know Mark Benioff and Salesforce, right? When he sort of started, it was a very dramatic statement like software is dead. And his point was, sort of downloaded software versus cloud software and so on. And we all know software is very much alive, and nothing, I think the thing about the tech industry is nothing ever dies, right? Because it's very well established in legacy systems and so on. Even COBOL is alive, for God's sake, right? Mainframes are alive. So nothing ever dies. I think the question though for entrepreneurs and developers usually is, okay, where is the new stuff going to emerge, and what shape is that going to take, right? So I suspect that as messaging systems get better and better, a lot of the volumes may shift away from email. But email is much more than just a messaging protocol. It's also the identity protocol. We know each other. We all have an email address, and it's easy to address someone. But I don't know how to send a message to someone in Slack. I mean, if they're in a different organization, not in my organization, there's no globally addressable IP and things like that, some address and so on. So I don't know if it ever goes away or if that's even sort of relevant, but I think if the bulk of the new innovation and the new services are all in sort of messaging and smart messaging, and they kind of just suck up all the new activity, I think it'll probably just be there as a legacy backend, sort of thing. But it was never designed. I think email was good and it's still great. It's very universal. But as these new services become universal, it takes a lot of the incremental growth away from email.
I actually don't know the answer, to be honest. Like, I think I don't have a good answer. I mean, I've seen the emergence of exciting platforms like Slack, and I've also seen some interesting behavior with usage. Like you see, and I come from an enterprise sales background, so I know email and the whole ESP landscape, whether it's exact target or responses. Like if you think about major marketing automation solutions that were used to penetrate another organization to sell services, like messaging kind of like creates a firewall right around this inner circle, which I think is also really crazy dynamic when you think about it, what that means for the future of enterprise sales. So I don't know if I have a really good answer for that. I do think that what I've at least observed is there's some interesting things happening around like Slack communities. So you're seeing like groups of people that rally around topics of interest, and that's sort of like, there's almost like a social layer that's happening on top of the messaging paradigm where, you know, it's more opt-in than, you know, opt-out, where that's where the conversation will happen. And I don't know if that's a trend that will continue, but it's just an interesting observation. Like I personally, like I live and breathe by email today because I do a lot more external facing stuff, like trying to get in front of investors, taking customer requests. Like that's the model that I know, and that might change. But it's more just like, I guess, general observations and thoughts than a real good answer on it. But for the time being, I don't know if it's going anywhere. I just think it's just going to be either a compliment or just maybe a little bit different, you know?
Yeah, I think that'll be my take as well, that it's about efficiencies. So far, communications were done using email because we didn't have a better option. Messages are very fleeting. You can't really keep them for longer periods of time. They're very immediate. They demand attention almost. They tend to be synchronous in some sense. But we've been using email for all kinds of things that we shouldn't have been, like inbox as a to-do list, or sending, you know, marketing messages and things like that, which ideally could be done better. Now we're already seeing ads on Facebook and whatever as doing a much better job of marketing. So I think that email hasn't died yet. I don't see it dying anytime soon. I think that a lot of functions, it's almost like email is being unbundled. It's like email was unbundled from the ad tech community by serving you ads on web pages. A further part of it is going to be unbundled into messaging for more real-time communication. So over time, you'll see a lot of this stuff going away into different sort of messaging or other places, but email as a whole will probably remain because that's the only way you can send long-form communication to other people in a universal manner. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon.
What do you think about, I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts on like the if you look at like the traditional ad tech model in an ecosystem, and maybe it's different consumer to enterprise, but kind of interested to get your guys' take on like a broader, you know, personalized ad play for companies that try to like, you know, like maybe it's a bot ad network.
Ad bot.
Yeah, like I don't know, like maybe it's a bot ad, maybe it's the one bot that rules all, you know, enterprise marketing that lives within the messaging platform.
I mean, I think bots have a huge potential for this, and both positively and negatively, because a bot is sitting in that chat room listening to messages of all sorts. On the enterprise side and on the consumer side, if three of us decide to get Chinese food, that bot knows we want Chinese food. The potential to target you rather than just 4 words in a search box versus a whole conversational thread over, you know, months and years or whatever it might be is phenomenal. Now the question is, how do you target people without, you know, pissing them off, right? As you said, you know, you want to get kicked out of the chat rooms, you want to keep them there. So I think there's a lot of potential just because of the amount of data you can collect, but also because for every person that you're talking to or is talking in your channel, you can now personalize, right? So the personalization aspect comes back. So I think we're going to go towards a point of, you know, where you can serve an ad not just to a demographic, but to that single user, leveraging data that this user or we would actually be scared of giving today to the Googles of the world, because, you know, but if your Slack bot sitting there, we're all fine. But that Slack bot is collecting all that data, way more so than Google does, because all Google has is anonymized email and by the way, none of these bots, and I think bot privacy will be interesting here, because none of these guys say we won't collect your data in a non-anonymous fashion, or our developers don't get to read this. Google has that in place after like years of this stuff, right? But today, we just randomly go make a, you know, maybe a heart-to-heart conversation on Slack or Facebook Messenger private room, which actually is going through this one channel that is owned by one company, which in their privacy policy may or may not specify what they do with it. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of positives, but there's also a lot of stuff to be sort of wary about in terms of how much data and control companies may have.
And just specifically on that, because I built a few Slack bots, the Slack API for the bots exposes your email address and profile to the bot if you're in a room that the bot's in.
Right.
And it's very easy to build a retargeting list for a bunch of emails. So that's, you know, one of the very simple ways you could go about doing that. And you could do it very anonymously, because my bot's in your room and all of a sudden you're seeing ads for something completely different if I sold you a list or something. So I
No,
mean,
there's no question that you're going to need some sort of good behavior from bots, right? It's the equivalent of privacy policy, not just privacy policy, but sort of behavioral guidelines, because bots can spam you, and you're sort of mixing man and machine, if you will, and it just, so WhatsApp, for example, their choice is to simply disable all APIs whatsoever because of the risk of spam, right? So they've taken one other extreme, and I think it'll be interesting to see when you open up bots. I mean, you'll always have the abusive bots, and how do you sort of prevent and control? And it's not only that. I think as at least in the Western world, I haven't seen as much in China, but we've sort of said our messaging space is private space. Nobody likes ads, right? Even in fact, even when Gmail sort of does it very, very selectively, but ads in public media is okay, but in private conversations is not good. So now you have bots in there that have a ton of data and context. Are they even allowed to put ads? Should they put ads? How do they be? I mean, lots of open questions actually.
So WeChat's API in China is very, very interesting on this. There's two kinds of, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's some questions.
Let me finish that thought and then I'll get to you, okay? I couldn't see you over there. So there's two kinds of bots in WeChat's API. There's subscription and then there's kind of one-to-one communication, and neither of them have a very strong ability to send you messages. If you send the subscription one a message, it can send you a message once in 30 days. And the other one, I believe, is it can send you messages, unlimited messages for 24 hours, and then it's cut off until you send it another message.
Yeah, this is a technical question. How do you make a bot? And on the back end, what algorithms are you using in order to operate the bot for communications?
So I think in our case, I mean, we have in our platform there's APIs and SDKs to enable bot building, but it could be as simple as like 1 or 2 API calls, right? These are just simple REST APIs, so it would take you minutes to sort of test it, embed it into your code, and get going. Those would be the simplistic bots. Of course, if you want to do more advanced stuff, it may take maybe a couple of hours, if you will. And that reflects just the messaging piece of it. Now, of course, your business workflow can take years, right? I mean, what you're building and iterating over. So I'm not addressing that part. The business logic is what it is. But building bots has become really, really trivial and easy. And I think that's extremely powerful, because now the ability to roll out new services or even new features is dramatically increased, right? I think, see, in a way, when Steve Jobs came up with this OS and app model, it was a throwback to the desktop model of downloading desktop apps. And you remember all the problems with it, right? Bloatware and downloading and maintenance and long release cycles. Apps need like a 1, 2, 3 month release cycle, because you have to test, QA, model every screen, etc. The moment we went to the browser thing, at least it cured a lot of the problems, right? It's sort of just-in-time code, so there's no bloatware, and you don't have to download, maintain, things like that. The cycle times improve dramatically. You can roll out a feature in minutes and such. The moment you get to messaging, you get back that capability, just like the browsers gave you, which is you can roll out, create a new bot, or rather add an extra feature to the bot, which just shows a new message, and the end user doesn't have to download a new app. Sort of, it's like the browser. The messaging app's already there. It's just a new message with some new interaction built in. So I think it's actually just nothing. I mean, it's really trivial, quite easy to build it.
You guys both brought us some examples of that are sort of obvious for companies to be messaging with their users, whether it's the KLM example or basic sales and customer support. When you've got hundreds of millions of users out there that are messaging, why aren't companies doing it?
Sorry,
why aren't businesses doing it? Like, it's so obvious, the KLM example, or you can think of 1,000 other examples, whether it's in e-commerce, or even tech support. Pride? They just don't want to.
They want their logo on the screen.
I've tried to sell into that market, and there's ops too. You have to kind of change the way you run a call center. I built a company called Chat Center. And that was an uphill battle until we found some companies that were really willing to go for it.
No, I might say I might just say it's because they've had so many other alternatives. Simple example, right? KLM says, okay, here's your confirmation, but anything you want to do, here's a link, go to the website, right? So, and on a large screen, that model works. I mean, you just click, you go to the browser, change your seating arrangement, change your food, whatever it is. So websites is where the interactivity was. But that choice gets taken away when you get to the small screen. Now, what are you going to say? Go to a website, open up a new app? I mean, each of these is just much harder to do than clicking on a big screen in an email link. So I think you're going to be forced to. I mean, these things happen because this is the easiest way to do it. And now they're going to have no choice except to just send a simple message which is interactive and the user can respond back without switching context. And I think that'll force them to do it.
Some of them are sending them out, but they're not responding.
Right, the third
Getting
aspect of
response.
it is understanding responses in a
Exactly.
scalable fashion, right? Because you can't have a call center for all those 100 million users on Facebook for your business. So if you took the 80-20 principle, then the 80% of these things should be automatable. But the technology for that has not been really created. Not very accessible.
No, but it's easier to
a
build
lot of
in
people.
a website than it is to build, to understand the responses. So
Exactly. I mean, I think
Fear of
from
cost.
the, sorry?
Fear of the costs and not having the technology yet to bring those costs down.
Correct, because it's not an accessible thing. Like web pages, I mean, this would have been a website in 1995, right? Same problem, or an app in 2009. It's exactly the same thing. And nobody understands it very well, but over time it standardizes and people start doing it.
And which channel should they go for, too? So you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess to go back to some of the questions you guys were talking about with regards to privacy, one of the things that's interesting about the messaging modality is that in the social context, when you're talking to your friends, of course, then that a shared chat thread can become a shared context. And in the case of Slack, you can have channels where there are bots, there are people, etc. And then in the case of like Grobot, that's right, there's multiple people talking to the same entity, the same bot. And so then you have this question of sort of meta-awareness, where the bot knows many things about many people, and for example, I could ply it with alcohol and then it would tell me secrets about my coworkers, except bots don't drink. So I guess one of my questions is thinking about this privacy conundrum where you have entities in the system where you want to be able to interact with them as though they're human-like, as though they know more things than they were programmed to know because they talk to many people in the system, but that there are not necessarily, as far as I know, clear ways of writing these policies in a way that exhibits prudence or judgment. So, recently there was like the article about, programming self-driving cars to like run into like the old lady versus the children or whatever, right? Like sort of the moralistic question. So I'm just wondering if there are any patterns or ways of thinking about that problem, because for example, if like my partner has booked flights with KLM and then I message KLM and I'm like, my partner has booked these tickets and I need to get my ticket because she's on the plane and I'm not, how do you sort of negotiate that space where there's sort of a shared privacy context that humans do a better job of negotiating?
I mean, to that last example, I would say that that can be handled by traditional account models, right, where it can only be used by that one account, right? In that, if somebody else books a ticket, then you can't access it, period, unless until you add it on. So it works the same way as logging in, right? And I think authentication, for instance, is one of the things that we're working on, which is that how do you authenticate with a bot, right? It's not very clear that there's no established patterns. So Facebook ID 1 versus Telegram ID X and Slack ID foo all map to the same United Airlines or KLM account. How do you handle that stuff? It's not clear.
I think it's a squishy question that I'm more interested in, because you're right. Of course, like, if there's a one-to-one sort of like, this data is locked to this user or to this sort of set of affiliations or whatever.
Right. But then there's a meta question around the bot knowing something about X person and the Y does not necessarily know it. I think there you might have to follow the same models as what we've been traditionally doing in databases, where you have the access control model, where you have a bunch of roles and things like that.
So like they have like managers, and the managers sort of have
Right,
access.
exactly. I think that's the paradigm.
I don't think
would
human
see.
judgment, well, that's generalizing a bit. In a messaging platform, it's easy for the bot to just quickly ask a human to exercise the judgment, right? So to me, it's not either all bots or all human. In fact, this may lead to the best combination of sort of human judgment and computational prowess on the bot side, and some combination thereof. But now you don't need an army of agents. You could have 10 agents and 1,000 bots handling 1 million customers.
Yeah.
That was kind of to my earlier point around how we've sort of complemented and not only facilitated how conversations happen within the organization, but just how we, I do think that there will be higher provisions around bot authentication and the process that you go through to add that. And I think right now it's in the early days, but I think over time Slack and other platforms will start to define that standard and probably limit the data access, but make it a little bit more stable and lasting. So
You had your hand up?
Yeah, a question about sort of the brand and retailer or retail operator, those kinds of interactions, and some of the companies that are trying to head in a direction that's vaguely like this, but then as soon as they sort of start considering these philosophical problems or any of these privacy issues or any of these kinds of things, they revert back to their mean, which is frankly, I don't even like my customers very much. I don't want to talk to them that much. And I don't like email and all these other things. So let's just wash the whole thing for 20 years. So how do you sort of overcome that when you're talking to my customers who generally end up falling back to that? It's a big problem. I mean, whether this is at an enterprise level and you're dealing with HR staff, where privacy is a big issue, obviously you've had to deal with that, or in a retail consumer one-to-one interaction, which is just fraught with all kinds of problems that honestly brands don't even like it in a retail context, much less in a tech context.
What's interesting is, previously I was working with a company in the offline analytics space, so like Wi-Fi, physical world analytics, and privacy is like is a very heated and hot topic, right? So when you walk into a Nordstrom or a Nike, right, you've got Wi-Fi enabled on your phone. You know, it's the way that I think we sort of saw it evolve was that, you know, and then Apple made a move with their push of Bluetooth LE and like the whole movement around iBeacon. But what, like, over time, our sales, at least, as you know, to the retailer, was that as customers receive a better experience, that level of comfort is just there. It establishes itself. So, you know, I don't know if it's more of just like, I feel like if the value to that trade-off is like equal and the customer's getting value out of that interaction, there's probably a higher likelihood that they're okay giving a little bit. It's got to be that give to get ratio, I think, is like the key thing. In the case of Wi-Fi analytics, I don't necessarily know how much value the customer is getting there, so I think that was like a very interesting dynamic. I think from Apple's standpoint, they sort of looked at Bluetooth LE and found the whole app ecosystem of retailers building interesting, engaging offline apps is like an opt-in to say, I'm willing to share location and proximity data in exchange for value in the retail experience. So again, in the context of bots, maybe it's a little bit different, but I think the overarching theme is like the give to get value ratio for the end user has to be there, or they're just not going to opt in and engage. And like they can, and like you said in bots, they can just disable you like that. So.
Just a tip: don't use the word master bot when you're talking to them.
Did I use that again? I love. Yeah, I gotta trade.
I'm just referring back, but it's brilliant. But don't ever say that to them.
There are some other questions here.
It's kind of related to your question, but how do you get like just the normal consumer to get used to the behavioral shift of like, okay, I'm going to book an Uber. Do I message someone on Messenger, or do I go to the Uber app, which is like pretty streamlined? Like, how do you get over that like UX on?
I think it's actually more natural to stay in messaging because think about it this way, right? You're already used to the fact that I want to chat with a friend. I just start a chat with someone, and then tomorrow in my address book I see, let's say, an Uber concierge. I mean, there's a lot of concierge services, as they call it, right, emerging as well. Match, Operator, Fetch. Quite a few of these, right? So Magic, I'm sorry, and a few others as well. So it's natural to talk to somebody. So your shopping assistant, maybe your, even some of your advisors, and you think it's an assistant, and you don't know whether it's a human or a bot. And well-designed bots, you won't even know or care whether it's human or not. And you just chat with them, and things will happen. And if it does the work, you say, "Wow, I can do these 3 things, and the next 5 things, and the next 100 things." And to me, I think the overload problem is actually easier to solve with bots than it was ever to solve with apps and websites and so on. In the sense that even if you had, let's say, 1,000 bots that are talking to you, firstly, you don't download anything, they're all in the cloud. If they have something to tell you, they come and alert you, otherwise they just sort of disappear, right, in the conversations, right? And lastly, if you still have an overload problem, I mean, your personal assistant bot to whom you've delegated some services to may be responding to all the other bots and managing them on your behalf, right? So I think there's a very, this is what you do in human organizations too. I mean, there may be a personal assistant who sort of filters incoming requests and messages and even addresses many of them. So I think, if anything, this is more natural to do than to go. Now, Uber is probably not the best example because it's a big brand and people are used to using that app and so on. But there's hundreds and thousands of other services which will come in as bots, and that's the first time they'll come in, and people will just start with that. And then, 2 years from today or 3 years from today, people will expect Uber to sort of match the same thing as well. So.
I feel like the behavioral shift is going to be slow though, because we're all used to an app model, and for people to start messaging, there needs to be a couple of things I think should happen. One, you'll start doing it in a contextual manner. Like the way Uber introduced themselves into Facebook Messenger is great because now anytime you see an address, you click it and you can get Uber there. So you're already used to that paradigm through messaging, and slowly they'll sort of get you into, send Uber a message to get it. I think over time, people will realize that using a bot is a lower friction way of getting you onboarded into their service. So if you see an ad, instead of saying download my app on the App Store, it's a one-click messenger.com/Uber link, right? Which you can actually use on you can use it on your browser, your phone, anywhere. And it's completely zero friction. You're like, I don't need to download the app. No more, please update your app or else you can't summon a cab anymore, right? You'll do that a couple of times and you'll read that. But I think all of this is going to happen over time. I don't think it's happening anytime soon, simply because these brands have spent so much money in sort of trying to get muscle memory built for us. And I think, that won't go away, the way of, let's say, a concierge service. Some people who are pressed for time, they use it, but I think for the most part, people prefer to interact with these services directly because it's much faster. Like for me to order food using Magic is about 100 times slower than me going to Yelp or Postmates and clicking a button and doing it, right? So, but let's say I want to do something really, really arcane. I think Magic helps me, like cancel Comcast apparently. That's something that Magic does really well, right? And I don't want to spend the time doing it.
I have a question in a different direction. We talked a lot about services and the enterprise and sort of building sort of, taking conventional apps and botizing them, I guess, lobotomizing them. Anyways.
That's another one.
So, sorry.
Master botting and lobotomizing.
So I guess my question is around whether you see the potential for developing like personal bots, like agents, essentially. Like, you talk about sort of having a personal assistant, but that's sort of a disembodied kind of version of yourself. It's like, are you available or not? Like, I'd rather sort of talk to your bot, which I think is you, and it sort of responds with information. So what is the likelihood that things along those lines will start to crop up, so I can sort of install those into like my Facebook Messenger account, for example, and then when people ask me questions, whether I'm there or not, there's sort of a set of responses based on the friend list that I have someone in or whatever. Because they have that in Slack already, where you can get my latest GitHub commits, or you can get this like working on .co, I think, sort of has a service like that sort of will be, this is the last check-in that they had or whatever. So it's sort of a more beefed up OA message, I guess, that can be a little bit more conversational in nature.
Like Clara and X.AI already do this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think we'll probably see that happen in the messaging space as well. Like I know X.AI is planning to do this for messaging very soon. And so they'll sort of offload that off of email directly into messaging as well. So that's going to happen. I think of the personal agent thing more as it's almost like a news feed for incoming bot requests or incoming requests, and this thing filters it for you, right? So rather than it being a concierge that acts on your behalf, I think the first agents we will see will mostly be like a news feed filter, right? And that basically allows you to train it to say, handle these 5 things, and for all of these things, just handle the default. Or rather, let me handle these 5 things, and for all the other ones, you do the default thing, right? That will probably happen. The question is, the persons or people who do it will most likely be the platforms, because they're the only ones who can control that experience. So like Google Now, I think actually, is probably the first embodiment of that, because Google Now is nothing but a smart notifications panel, right? And you can actually tell it to do things like, next time I get an email that, this would be easy for them to do, right? Next time you get an email from United, you say, also check me in, right? Something like that. Or remind me to check me in right now, but in the future, they could actually check you in, right? So I think that's where I see the agent part going, but controlled by platforms.
How do you see monetization for bots? So both in terms of like how you actually make money and also the payment processing. Because for making money, like most messaging is free, so charging on that is going to be difficult. Also advertising is going to be even harder than mobile, which is already pretty hard. And the actual payment itself, because people don't have payment info in the, oh, sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't have payment info tied to their messaging app.
I can talk to speak to that one, because it's been something that we've actually been wrestling with. I think, to your point, our strategy has been there's got to be some level of value with this core bot interaction to allow it to be widely adopted. So we've led with, call it a freemium, but being able to enable GrowBot for free and then provide value-added services within the enterprise that we know customers will pay for. From a building and infrastructure standpoint, we learned a lot. In my background in enterprise sales, I initially tried to go tops down and try to find the chief people officer at all these companies and sell them a bot that completed performance reviews as one massive thing, and failed miserably. I think we generated like $1,500 in monthly recurring revenue. But the trade-off between like just hyper growth and monetizing that whole package and service just didn't make sense, which led to a very narrow, very focused solution, which has worked really well. I think that the platforms are going to help a lot with that. Like if you look at the marketplace, I think Slack took a big step yesterday. I know Atlassian launched their marketplace. I think they haven't said explicitly what that will look like. I think it'll replicate more probably the Apple Store, where there's potentially a rev share component, or maybe even like the Force.com platform, where the platforms will own the infrastructure in the building, will help facilitate that, cut a check. That's one hypothesis. I think that's probably realistically what will happen over time. But from our standpoint, we've leaned in with something that we know can spread pretty wide, and then are providing value-added services on top of that to build later. And there might be a complement where organizationally we come in with a sales team, like an enterprise sales team, similar to how you think about how Yammer did in the early days. Even like Slack now, right? Like their enterprise product on that's supposed to hit Q1 and pricing at like $40 a user per month. So there's questions around like, if you're building a bot, right, like, and they're pegging you to a Slack pricing model on a per user basis, they're giving you a little bit more leeway if they're charging more for an enterprise product. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that are still trying to figure itself out. I think monetization is a good question. We have a guess, and we've proven it, but to a certain extent. But I don't know what you guys think, if you have any other points of view on that. I know your services are a little bit different. I'm very core focused on the bot development, but I think you guys also are kind of an infrastructure play, and there's obviously probably come at that from a very different perspective. But
yeah, I think what I'd say is some of it has to play out, but you can kind of get some hints from earlier paradigms, right? I mean, let's say app monetization was a challenge for a long time. Paid apps for certain use cases worked fine, but consumer use cases, it had to be free, and then they figured out in-app, and in particular things like Candy Crush and so on, where they tease you enough and take you to a certain level, you just kind of absolutely have to pay, right? And so on. So same thing with the bot. I mean, the bot's going to engage with you at such a personal level and knows so much and makes your life so much easier that at some point you're just going to pay for the convenience, and you're not going to want to get rid of the bot. So there's similar kind of models will play out. The bot might even negotiate with you how much it may charge and how much you might pay for what you're doing. But I think it boils down, if you're providing value, you get the adoption. Even in terms of adoption, there may be viral bots, right? You tell a bot, or the value of the bot goes up if more of your friends are using it, for example, and things like that may drive the marketing, right? So it's not just advertising driven, but sort of inherent viral in the product. So I think it'll have to be things along those lines.
Yeah, I just love the idea of like Growbot being our best salesperson. Right? Like that's an interesting dynamic when you think about upsell, and even how potentially maybe Slackbot fits into that.
So the bot asks the user, "Can you refer me to a friend?"
Yeah, I honestly think we noticed this.
Or I'm not going to talk to you anymore unless.
Yeah.
So I built a bot called Text Turner that does human translations, and we charge by the word. You put your credit card in our website, and then it knows which account you're in and bills you. So that's how it's the easiest way to do it today. But it's really a bad way. I mean, I think that the like Justin said, the apps are going to get in the middle. The platforms are going to get in the middle, and that it just seems so natural for them to take the cut. We're going to take. I have 3 hands up out here, so we're going to take 3 more questions, and then that's it. So I think I saw your hand first.
I just had a related question to this question. How do you actually, like, let's say you do have a freemium bot, how do you actually pitch to those people that you have paid features? Like, how do you get them to pay for those features?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're like constantly iterating on. I think what we'll also, through building an engaging experience, at least on the enterprise side, you sort of understand the hierarchical dynamic of an organization, and there's always a lot of it has to do with price point, right? Like if you're selling a service that's $5-10 a user per month within an instance, it's something easy for a manager to put down on their P card. If you're charging a service that licenses for 125K, 250K annually recurring within that, I think it's just a different sales model, different cost center. Our hypothesis now, and at least how Slack and some of these other platforms have grown, is that there's team instances. So if a company like Adobe or Intuit has 10 Slack instances, I think Slack will be the one to try to unify that under one umbrella to simplify their hierarchy, to allow you to make it easier to potentially upsell within that. But the key is you gotta nail engagement. If you're building a freemium product, it has to be there, because if nobody's using it, obviously you're either gonna get disabled or tossed out, and there's not gonna be true value. Yeah, that's probably a lot of it is still in its earlier days around how to upsell into a massive contract, but that's at least kind of how we're thinking about it.
I think I might add a couple of things, which is bots or the bot paradigm will have to take cues from the natural human interaction, right? Because you're using chat as the way to engage with the user. So it's sort of in a regular conversation, right? The bot might say, well, I can do this. Oh, by the way, I can also help you with 2 or 3 other things. And if the person picks up on that, then you say, okay, here's what I can do, and here's how much it costs, and this is an upsell, and so on. So it'll have to be somewhat more natural, right? Just like in the real world, if it's a used car salesman sort of selling to you versus sort of, more subtle and more personal sales, if you will. But there are pros and cons, right? So maybe it can't be as overt, but on the flip side, it knows a lot about, it has so much more context. So it knows when to introduce the new feature or upsell, and at least in some of the bots that have been built on our platform, a well-behaved bot is supposed to introduce itself, right? So the first time it comes into a chat room, it says, well, here are the things I can help you with, here are the keywords, here's how you can invoke me if you forget, here's the help word, and so on. So because you don't know, you're meeting this new person or this new entity that's going to help you with what can it do, and by the way, over time it can add more capabilities too. So there's sort of a conversational mechanism in which it first educates you on what it can do, and upsells you in a subtle way. So
yeah, I love that. I think the other point is discovery is something we find super fascinating. In the instance with Growbot, we tried to build something that was really social in a sense, where we see, and our end customer eventually will be probably a CFO or a chief people officer if we're doing massive deals that we one day want to do, where we've seen that champion, that person seek us out after recognizing key commands. And it didn't happen through necessarily the bot messaging that person, because again, knowing email, knowing the context of the organization, it came through them kind of discovering in the communication platform that this functionality potentially could exist, and allowed an inbound lead, ironically was email, that said, hey, I noticed you're the founder of X, I'd be interested to know more about, can you do X, Y, Z? And so I think there's just some interesting models that you'll start to see around internal solution and service discovery before there is the super, we'll use not master, but master, the super bot that rules, solution recommendation and discovery,
Yeah.
So.
So last question.
I got a question which is more on the side of user experience and user interface. So in bots and in messaging interfaces, how do you guys envision the development of user habits? In classic graphic interfaces where you have buttons and tickers and everything, you basically try to create a monotonic interface which has just one flow, so that the customer gets the habit really fast, really in an obvious way. Whereas in a messenger, when you're communicating with a bot, you have 100 ways of saying the same thing and getting the same thing done. And on the other hand, the same control in the same word, the same message in different contexts can also mean different things. So how do you envision getting customers and users accustomed, like having habits in messaging interfaces? And do you have any insights about retention and like getting customers, getting users, like doing the same things in bots?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cover that. So right before I was building this as a platform service, I was building a bot that basically does a lot of the consumer stuff. And I got a